Our next presenter, I'm fortunate to introduce, will be Mr. Charlie Riedl, who's Executive Director, Center for Liquified Natural Gas. Before Charlie starts, my apologies for those who are just joining the afternoon session. We are continuing a format that was established this morning in which I will not fully read all of the bios. I will direct you to the program to fully look all the bios of our impressive speakers, and then we'll have them present, and time permitting, we'll then have some questions. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Mr. Charlie Riedl.
Thanks, Marjorie. Appreciate it. And good afternoon to everybody. Happy to be here again, presenting at USEA. Happy to follow Dina and appreciate her not taking all of my LNG news for her own presentation. So why don't we jump into some of the slides that I've got prepared. I think the goal of my comments this afternoon really are just to provide a quick update on what's happening as it relates to the US LNG industry and provide some of additional context around what it is that we at the Center for LNG have been working on. And then hopefully, Marjorie, to your point, we've got some time left at the end of my comments to hopefully answer any questions that you all might have. So Center for LNG represents almost all of the projects that are currently exporting LNG from the United States. There is currently one project that is not part of our membership, but you can see from this list, the rest of those organizations are either actively involved in the making of LNG here in the US or the transportation and purchase and global trade of LNG around the world. So real testament to our members and what they've been able to accomplish since 2016, when we saw the first LNG cargo leave the shores of the lower 48 bound for commercial use abroad. So why don't we skip to the next slide if possible? I want to talk just a little bit about one of the areas that the Center for LNG has been spending quite a bit of time earlier, actually this winter, and as we round out the remaining months of winter, focused on is really the importance of certainty for the LNG market, right? What we've heard and what we've all seen in the news is the sort of global supply crunch for natural gas and the need for natural gas around the world, both in Europe and Asia, sort of the two primary destinations that US LNG has been going to historically, and where we would expect to see it continuing. What we've seen in the short term this winter are renewed calls for curtailments of LNG exports, slowing LNG exports, pausing permits, and what I'm here to sort of offer as a rebuttal to that this afternoon is that not only is that sort of a short-sighted plan that if those steps were taken to somehow slow US LNG exports, it would have much larger ramifications on a global level because of the reliance on US natural gas abroad. And Dina talked a little bit about what was happening here with domestic production and what we're seeing as a response to supply and demand metrics that are happening here in the US. But more importantly, what we're seeing is that US LNG is continuing to not only respond to those market signals globally, what we're seeing is that those projects are now actually providing that crucial gas that in these winter months that the countries around the world are relying on in order to make sure that the heat and electricity stay on for many of these places that have seen record withdrawals of their natural gas happening this winter. So one of the things that we've seen is pushback and calls for stopping LNG exports. And what I would suggest is taking any of those steps aren't going to have any sort of real meaningful impact on US natural gas prices one way or the other. And really what we're seeing is this confluence of events that has taken place, really starting with COVID. And I'll talk a little bit about what we saw as an impact of LNG exports as it relates to COVID in a couple of slides. But results of COVID, weather, and then overall sort of prices of commodities and goods in general rising with inflation. But if you look sort of forward into the first quarter of this year and into late spring, early summer, IEA and EIA both are predicting that gas prices are going to return sort of to those pre-COVID levels, which we fully expect to see happen here. So pausing those permits or those applications for additional expansions of LNG facilities would have enormously detrimental impact on markets that are reliant on U.S. gas, and not to mention damage some of the relationships that we have, the valuable trade relationships that we have with allies around the world. If we can skip to the next slide. So let's just talk a brief recap about how we got here. As I mentioned in the first slide, we've been exporting natural gas from the lower 48 since 2016. The majority of these facilities that are currently exporting natural gas, for those who aren't familiar, were originally built to import natural gas. We thought we were running out of gas here in the US, as Dina has done prior to my presentation, outlining the supply situation here in the US. We are obviously awash with natural gas here in the US. That has all been brought on by the shale gas revolution that we saw at the beginning of the 2000s. And now, as we've started to capitalize on that with building these facilities that are now capable of exporting natural gas, we've exported gas to over 35 countries. And late last year, we saw the United States become the world's largest exporter of LNG. So we have in 6 short years, basically not even 6 full years, our first cargo left in April of 16 from Cheniere's facility at Sabine Pass. In less than 6 years, we have become the world's largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, which is a true testament to not only the members, the CLNG members who have built and operated those facilities, but also the partnerships that we've been able to establish across party lines of 2 separate administrations and now into a third to get these projects permitted, constructed, built, and operational. Is quite a telling story, good news story for U.S. Not only regulatory agencies and the work that they were able to accomplish in figuring this out and making sure that we're able to do it safely, but also those companies that were able to solve the engineering challenges and locate these facilities in places that were conducive for exporting gas. We can jump to the next slide. So let's just talk a little bit about COVID. I think last year when we tried this presentation remotely, we were sort of hopeful that we were rounding the bend on COVID, and obviously here we are all sitting remotely in front of computer screens. I would much rather be at the press club with all of you talking about this, but yet here we are. So what you can start to see is that we saw real demand destruction happen in the LNG space, dropping all the way down to 3.1 billion cubic feet of gas demand in July. And this morning, I'm happy to report that we were actually up just over 13 BCF of feed gas into our facilities. So our facilities are running here in the US at above nameplate capacity, meaning we're producing as literally as much possible LNG as the facilities are capable of safely doing so at this point. So we are really sort of seeing the demand for that LNG increase rather rapidly from July of last year, and now as we sort of move into this year, we expect the demand to remain robust for LNG. Forward looking as well, and the graph is a bit difficult to make out here, but what we've seen is really that demand, as we've seen the rest of the world start to emerge from many of the restrictions, that the demand for natural gas, especially because of the fact that they weren't able to produce in a manner that where a lot of these gas producing nations that haven't historically relied on LNG are now looking for LNG, just because the storage levels are so low in a lot of these locations where they were restricted from operations and producing natural gas or drilling for natural gas. Europe is a really great example of their storage levels just sort of at historic lows this winter, and relying more on foreign sourced gas. And obviously US LNG is filling a major part of that storage requirement for Europe. We can move to the next slide. So let me just talk briefly about the competition that we're seeing between Asia and Europe, and what that actually is playing out. You can start to see here with the graph on the price from between Henry Hub, which is sort of the gray line there that has sort of hummed along right around that sort of $4 to $5 range, and where we've been. The JKM is sort of the marker that the Asian market uses, and then TTF is the marker that is used in Europe, and you can sort of see the competition for LNG cargoes, and obviously the spread between Henry Hub and those markets for gas. So it creates a very sort of competitive market for those cargoes of liquefied natural gas, not only from the United States, but from other LNG producers around the world. But it also gets to exactly the point that I was making as to why our facilities are running at capacity right now. The demand for gas around the world remains high. We expect it to remain strong and robust. It's why you're seeing projects that are still being built and coming into operation out there, and why we're still seeing projects submitting permits for applications to build before the FERC and before Department of Energy, and why we think that we see this administration continuing to provide support for LNG exports. If we can move to the next slide. So let's just talk about the second wave, right? Currently, we have 6 facilities that are operational here in the United States. There are actually the Venture Global project has just started taking feed gas, which is a great development that they literally just got the okay to start doing that this week. And obviously a great sign as we continue to see expanded demand for US LNG. That project will likely become operational a bit later this year, likely before the end of the second quarter. The Golden Pass project is underway from a construction standpoint and will become operational in the next couple of years. Sabine Pass is expanding with Train 6. The Corpus Christi facility is expanding with Train 3. So we're seeing existing facilities expand, and we're also seeing new construction projects start to come online as well. So when we start to look at where these facilities are at right now, we're just at about 12.5 billion cubic feet of feed gas demand a day, and we'll be just about 14 before the end of the year. So expansion's continuing to grow here. We're continuing to respond to the market conditions, which signal that natural gas is still likely to be a major component in the energy mix around the world, helping to reduce emissions and also address energy poverty, especially in emerging markets like India and other Asian countries, where we're starting to see the transition away from dirty fossil fuels into natural gas and partnering with renewables, as Dina was outlining. Jump to the last slide. I'm not going to spend too much time here and obviously allow us an opportunity to maybe get into a quick Q&A. Dina spent the majority of, or a good chunk of her presentation talking about NGSA's winter outlook, which the Center for LNG is a part of NGSA. So we focus only on LNG markets and what's happening in the LNG space. But this winter outlook spends a lot of time talking about what we see happening with LNG exports, if you're interested in learning more. And obviously, I'm always available to chat with others and answer any questions that you may all have. So thanks again for giving me the opportunity to walk through these remarks. Hopefully we're able to do so in a manner that allows us some time for some questions.
Charlie, thank you so much for those comments in your presentation. I appreciate it. I want to delve a little bit into the pricing. Dina alluded to it a bit, and you also did in your presentation,
Sure.
Of how natural gas prices are impacting your organization. Can you talk a little bit more detail about that?
Sure. So I think that's a great question, and one that we've been answering a lot this winter, not surprisingly. One of the big things that has been suggested is that LNG exports are directly attributable to the rise in natural gas prices that we've seen this winter here domestically. And the reality is that demand that I talked about, we're just 12.5 BCF a day of demand, is about 10% of the total market share for natural gas. And so what we've seen is that 12 BCF number was happening sort of long before we saw the increase in domestic prices of gas. And as a result of that, it's hard to sort of make the connection that LNG exports are the reason we're seeing this demand or this short-term commodity price, right? And the reality is, as Dina talked a little bit about it in the drilled and uncompleted wells. I think from a pricing perspective, the important thing to understand here is that there are few places around the world that you're going to find a more stable pricing mechanism for natural gas than here in the U.S. The Henry Hub sort of continues to hover in that sort of $4 to $5 range. I would expect that what we continue to see is as the rig count increases, responding to those demand signals, right? This is just what we're starting to see is the producers, the financial discipline that they've been suggesting that they were going to operate since pre-COVID levels now actually operating in that manner. So from a pricing perspective, LNG exports, like I said in my earlier remarks, are having very little impact on that overall pricing of U.S. gas as it relates to commodity.
Thank you for that. I also want to ask a question on another comment you made regarding how LNG exports are helping to meet the demand in Europe. Do you forecast that demand staying at the level it is now? Will it be increasing, and will we be able to continue to meet that demand?
That's a fantastic question, Audrey. I think that the sort of short-term answer is yes. I would expect that demand for natural gas in Europe is going to remain robust, especially through the winter months here. It obviously, as we get into shoulder seasons, the demand decreases. I think that there are a lot of variables as far as what European demand for U.S. gas is going to look like in sort of a longer term outlook. You know, obviously you've got the sort of Nord Stream 2 and a whole host of issues there that I don't think I probably have enough time to delve into this afternoon without cutting into the next presenter's time. But I do think that there will be a place for U.S. LNG in Europe for the foreseeable future. And that's evidenced by what we've seen in some of the contractual agreements that have been put in place in recent months between European buyers and U.S. LNG suppliers. So I do think that there will be an important role for U.S. gas in Europe for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Charlie. And fortunately, we have time for one more question, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, happy to.
Fantastic, great. How does the U.S. reach its climate goals in the context of LNG?
Well, I think that what we're starting to see, right, is that these climate goals that the U.S. is suggesting, right, I would look at it as part of our foreign policy plan to really help other countries address their climate goals, right? And so the U.S. has taken a leading position in trying to make climate change a global issue and helping those countries that are anxious to transition from dirtier fuels towards natural gas or towards cleaner solutions. And obviously LNG is a big part of that equation as you think about where they're heading to and the idea that they want to transition. As the U.S. thinks about its foreign policy positions on climate, natural gas is likely to play a large role there for all of the reasons that have already been mentioned, right? That it is affordable feedstock, it is clean, and it offers reliability coming from the United States. So I think that as we in the United States are setting these ambitious climate goals for not only domestically, but also committing to being a partner and helping those countries that are trying to move and follow the U.S. lead in addressing their climate goals, LNG is well positioned to help play a critical role in that scenario.
Wonderful, Charlie, thank you. We've ended it at a perfect time, so we don't have to take any further time from our next presenter.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. Thank you for giving us a very clear and insightful view of the future of LNG, not only in the U.S., but internationally as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for inviting me. Appreciate it. Take care.
Have a good one. Thank